Let's get to some breaking news right now out of Dallas, where two planes crashed mid-air during an air show just a few hours ago.
This is the beginning of a long process. We will not jump to any conclusions.
So something that they mentioned here is not jumping to any conclusions, and it's very important, especially when you have an aviation mishap that's as publicly visible as this. You have multiple eyewitnesses, you have video documented evidence of the incident happening, and it's easy to watch the video and all of a sudden jump to a conclusion about what went wrong.
The NTSB arrived in Dallas Sunday and already interviewed witnesses and collected wreckage from a deadly plane crash during the Wings over Dallas air show.
So the NTSB arrived on the scene pretty quickly after this mishap took place, and that's extremely important, especially when it comes to interviewing witnesses that saw the mishap, whether those are witnesses that were on the ground, even those that filmed the mishap, or individuals that were in the control tower, other pilots that were airborne at the time the mishap took place. The longer the NTSB waits to interview those individuals and collect statements from them, the more likely it is that their story might shift a little bit. They might forget one specific detail out of their story, or they could be potentially influenced, not intentionally, but they're seeing this on social media, they're talking to their friends, or talking to other people that saw it happen, and all of a sudden you start to remember things differently. So that's why it's so important to get those witness statements early on.
With no flight recorder on board, crews say videos of the crash will be critical to the investigation. Officials.
Okay, so neither of these aircraft, you've got the P-63 aircraft that collided with the B-17 aircraft. Neither of them have a flight recorder on board. Because it was an air show, you have a lot of video evidence of the mishap taking place. Now, anytime you have an air show, regardless of how small or how large that air show is, there is always going to be a thorough plan involved for deconflicting the aircraft that are participating in that air show, so that way they know how to stay out of each other's way and how to avoid stuff like this from happening. And I'm not trying to suggest that they did not have a deconfliction plan, because even when you do have a good plan in place, things can still go wrong, as evidenced from this video.
Officials say 5 crew members of the B-17 Flying Fortress were killed, along with the pilot of the P-63 King Cobra. Highway 67 was shut down when debris fell from above.
So the reason why they shut down the highway, obviously to clear the debris, but also it's important anytime you have an aircraft mishap, you want to pay attention to where the debris from the aircraft is going. Where that debris lands could be indicative of something else that could have contributed to the mishap.
Aviation attorney John Kettles says the aircraft both appeared to be working well at the time of the crash, but the smaller P-63 likely had poor visibility.
Now, certainly it does appear from the video that both aircraft were fully functioning the way they were designed to. However, we won't know that until the complete results of the investigation are revealed, because there could have been a malfunction with the flight controls of a plane that occurred at the last second that could have ultimately led to this incident happening. I'm not trying to suggest that, so we want to let the investigation run its course. What I do want to take away from this video is, in a normal situation, if you are the pilot of the P-63 aircraft on the left-hand side of the screen here, you are in a left-hand turn, and in that left-hand turn, you do not have good visibility out the right-hand side of the aircraft, because as you look to your right, you're really looking up more towards the sky, because you basically have the fuselage of the aircraft that you can't really look through to see this B-17 aircraft off your right-hand side. And so that's why in situations like this, where you have aircraft that could be potentially at the same altitude, having that deconfliction plan in place is extremely important, but also having positive visual identification of the other aircraft so you can maintain that deconfliction yourself is extremely important.
Just a tragic loss, most likely caused by some just momentary lapse in judgment or momentary carelessness.
Okay, so his comment about momentary lapse in judgment or carelessness is really frustrating to hear, especially from an attorney that perhaps should know better, because what that means is it's essentially sounding like he's placing the blame entirely on the pilots that were in these aircraft, and saying essentially one of them is potentially responsible for this happening. And while that certainly could be the case, it's still important to let the investigation run its course to determine whether there's something else, as I mentioned, that we're just not seeing that caused this mishap to take place. And it's not something that we can just chalk up to carelessness on the part of a pilot.
They say it's still too soon to know who or what was at fault.
What was the plan to keep everything safe, because obviously that plan didn't work.
In regard to that last comment about obviously the plan didn't work, I don't really like that statement. I want to let the NTSB thoroughly investigate the mishap in order to determine all of the potential factors, including, radio transmissions between the aircraft, the deconfliction plan, the weather that day, whether there was something wrong with the aircraft that prevented one pilot from having visibility of the other aircraft, whether there was a malfunction with the aircraft. So in order to respect the families and to honor those that have lost their lives in this tragic incident, let's allow the NTSB to conduct their investigation and then publish the full report with all the findings, because ultimately the goal is to prevent a mishap like this from happening again.